Hello. Today we will be going over the Tata Steel Masters round 2. This is Donchenko versus Caruana. Round 2.3. We have a Slav defense. Caruana has black and he prevailed in this game. Let's take a look. D4, D5, C4, C6, Knight F3, Knight F6, E3, Bishop F5, getting that bishop out. That's something that I would do. I would place that bishop on F5. Knight C3, E6, Knight H4, attacking the bishop. Bishop moves to E4, and it provokes F3. Bishop back to G6. Donchenko develops Bishop D2, Bishop E7, Knight takes, H takes. So White opted to exchange his knight for that bishop. White has the bishop pair advantage. So Queen to C2, Knight B to D7. Caruana continues his development. White castles long, inviting a queen side pawn storm. Something like A6 and then B5 eventually. And then B4, dislodging the knight. And Black could line up his pieces along the C and B files to commence an attack against the king. And Caruana followed that path. Caruana played A6. G4, White tries to start an offensive on the king side. D takes, bishop takes, B5. The attack on the queen side begins where White has castled. Bishop back to E2, C5. Caruana tries to dislodge the center with this C5 move. His intentions are to go after the king. Now, White could have opted for D takes, then Knight takes. I like this better. B takes, Knight takes, because Black doesn't get this pawn formation on the queen side where the C pawn would stay intact and he would advance the pawns on the queen side. By taking the C pawn, I think White disrupts the queen side majority where an attack could commence against White's king. So D5, leaving that pawn structure intact here. The B and C pawn, and a pawn on A6. So in effect, White decided to sacrifice this pawn. Knight takes, pawn takes. Then F4. There was a possibility that White could play king to B1, getting the king off the C file, then queen to B6, centralizing, then F4, knight F6, and something like bishop C3. Let's look at the pawns here. 2, 4, 6, 3, 7, and White would still be down a pawn, and looks like Black could come up with a queenside attack against the king with those pawns. The pawn formation looks rather ominous for Black in this position. But White plays F4, then B4. The pawn march begins. Donchenko plays E4, trying to disrupt the pawn formation. But now comes D4. And those pawns now dominate on the queen side. And they look quite threatening. If Black could get a C4 in, for instance, and then threatening C3, White would be in trouble. E5. This move is not highly favored. Perhaps king to B1, knight B6, H4, and something like queen to D7. And then maybe an A-pawn march by Black in this position. But Donchenko plays e5, leaving the king on the on c1. e4, then d4. Oh, wait a minute, e5, my fault. Then knight b6, and then e6, giving up another pawn. White is hoping for something like pawn takes. Then we have queen takes. And that would give the advantage to white. So that's why he played e6. But Caruana could see through that. He knew not to take that e6 pawn, so he centralizes the queen. Queen to d5. He didn't take the pawn. That's a brilliant move, this queen d5 move. And yes, c4 is a possibility in this position. So Donchenko takes, e takes. B3 may have been better here. B3. Then comes that pawn march that I was talking about. A5 and A4. Then maybe bishop to D3, then A4. And white is in trouble. But Donchenko takes. Then Caruana doesn't capture the pawn. He plays his king over to F8. He doesn't want to be distracted by playing queen takes F7 or king takes, which would expose, king takes F7 would expose the king to attacks. Maybe a rook to F1, then F5. So Donchenko plays H4. So hold on, king to F8, H4. Looking at king to B1. King to B1, then maybe C4. So H4, queen takes A2. All kinds of threats around the king. Then queen takes. Instead, this is another mistake. White should have played queen here, trying to exchange off queens to release the pressure here. With the queens on the board, white is not doing well, not doing good at all here. So an exchange of queens was called for here with queen to B1. We have queen to B1, queen takes, king takes, rook takes H4 material, rook takes, bishop takes, and then G5. And black has a decisive advantage here. The F7 pawn would eventually be picked up, and he has a queenside majority. Well, he's up a few pawns here. What would we have here? Up 3 pawns actually after they exchange, after king takes. So Donchenko decides to take, and he's also threatening the knight here. But Caruana ignores the queen takes B6 threat and plays B3, threatening mate in 1 with queen to A1 mate. Bishop to E1, making an escape route for the king. Then comes C4. The pawns are caving in. Rook takes. If queen to B1, then rook to C8. Again, those pawns are killers. There are threats everywhere. D3, C3. So rook takes D4, knight to A4. Threatening queen takes B2, threatening the B2 square. So then the queen comes back. And now here comes a nice move. Bishop to A3 by Caruana. If B takes, then queen takes, check. Queen to E2. Queen takes check. I don't have a continuation on that. So we have queen takes check. King has to move. Can't go queen to b2, queen takes. So if we go here, then you have c3 check. I mean, then, well, queen here now, then c3. I mean, the position is hopeless here. The pawns would advance and eventually get to come to c2. So I'm missing something. Queen air. I don't have a variation for that, but king to c2, queen air. If b2, then king to d2, queen to c3, king to d1, and then he'll lose a rook in that variation. So this is a hopeless position for white. So instead, bishop to a3. So you can't take the pawn because queen takes check. Take the bishop because queen takes check. So plays queen takes. Donchenko takes the queen, then b takes. King moves. And now in this position, if queen, then bishop there, check. And he picks up the queen. And there's still sort of a fight left. Although black should win in this position. So b takes, king to c2, c2, rook to b8, attacking the b2 pawn, threatening rook takes. And this in this position, white is totally lost. So Donchenko, he panics. He just plays rook there, check, gives up a piece. He gives up the piece, but he takes the bishop back. But then comes c3. Right, if bishop takes, then rook c8. So c3, also threatening. After c3, we're also threatening to queen here. So the bishop moves. Then rook there, picking up the e2 bishop. King to b3, knight moves check. And Donchenko resigns. So let's look at where the mistakes were. Well, e6 was really a mistake here. Hoping that black would take. Yeah, that he would take, and then comes queen takes. Queen takes g6. So this is a very nicely played game by Caruana. He capitalized on white's mistakes in this game. So we'll analyze some more games shortly. Thanks for watching.